Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This is your show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Nosferatu. So, a lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, we had that whole beginning with Bing, and obviously he had written a letter to I want to, basically answering an ad in the comic book for Christmas Land, which he has that weird nightmare about Danny, and also he sees Charles in the moon and he's winking at him. So it's interesting because it seems Christmas Land doesn't, well, in particular, Charles doesn't just go after kids. I mean, it seems like it's all tailored towards kids, but it seems like adults have their own place too. Because it seems like he's going after Bing because I guess because it seems like basically we end up finding out later on that the reason why Charles does what he does is because it's all about preserving people's childhood. Because for him, in the twisted way he's thinking, he thinks that he's saving these kids because it's I'm pulling them away from their terrible parents. That might do stuff here and it's hard to say. It puts you in this weird situation. You're because at the same time it's him talk about I'm going after these kids who parents treat them like crap, make them eat cat food or something, or sell them off in situations like that. So it's part of you are okay, so are you some savior or are you not? The thing is, it could just easily be him lying to Bing. He could just be making up an excuse yeah, some parents might falter a little bit. Yes, there are some piece of shit parents, but who are to say that everyone he's going after are necessarily pieces of shit parents? They might just be parents that aren't 100% willing to let a kid do whatever they want to do. It might be that type of thing of there's more to it than not. It's hard to say, because if it's not, it's kind of well, is he doing bad things? Yes, no, it's hard to say, because even Danny's parent, what did his mom do at worst? It seems she'd rather kind of have sex with her boyfriend than comfort you when you're scared or something like that. It's yeah, that's a little on the shitty side, I guess, but it's not the worst thing ever. Like I said, it might be considered a little shitty. It's not that big of a thing. But I'm curious, is that just kind of one example of their situation? Did we get every the way he talked about it last episode didn't seem like it was that big of a deal when it came to Danny's situation with his mom, but who knows? But he even makes a point to be oh, I wish I could have been there for you, Bing. So I guess because Bing almost seems like he is a little childlike, he might be stunted. I think, probably must mean that something happened to him when he was younger. So I think that's what's happening for him. It's oh, I'm helping save these kids because I wasn't, maybe what happened to him when he was younger? Maybe his parents are shitty. So it's no, I got to make up for it for these other kids. I got to save them from their situations because it's oh, these are these kids. They're near death, but they might not die years from now. But this is their childhood innocence, everything that is their childhood before it kind of ends up dying is what that graveyard is supposed to represent. And I guess kind of all your childlike wonderment is taken away, which maybe that's what Charles wants anyway. It's oh, I don't want it to die because I can't have it if it dies. Maybe, once again, I don't know. It's interesting because this situation makes me think, Bing's situation, you had that dude who, Charles basically lets get, the dude who was doing the dirty work, killing the boyfriend and the mom, Danny's mom, last episode. I guess that dude was obviously the previous, Bing, doing whatever it took. And I think for him, it's probably a situation of oh, that's what I'm, for him, he was oh, maybe he was someone who wasn't, childhood was kind of ripped away from him. And so it's oh, I'm going to take upon this calling to save all these kids. That's their justification for why they roll with it. But once again, who knows if that's truly Charles' intentions or not to really save these kids. It's also interesting going into, obviously, Christmas Land, you got the snowman waving to Bing and everything. And I'm that's creepy. I know, obviously, he's looking at it oh man, look at this wonderment. I'm looking at it yeah, that's a little creepy. That ain't no Olaf. That's some horror movie Jack Frost type of thing. That's just, it seems like something you see in Christmas Town and Halloween Town and Kingdom Hearts or something like that. Halloween Town's attempt at Christmas. It seemed creepy. I don't know. Maybe it's just the lighting of it just waving in the dark like that. Whatever the case may be. Also, specifically Kingdom Hearts 2, I should be referencing that. Instead of just saying Kingdom Hearts, I meant specifically Kingdom Hearts 2. But you get what I'm trying to say. Nevertheless. But it doesn't just stop there. Obviously, there's a lot of other interesting things to talk about. I wasn't expecting Vic. Side note, a little interesting thing I ended up finding out. The actress who plays her, Ashley Cummings, is Australian. Man, dude, people who can just are so good at accents, dude. It's crazy. Like her putting on an American accent like that, putting on specifically, like a Massachusetts accent like that too is pretty dope too. On top of it, I just think that's kind of interesting. Nevertheless, her confronting her dad, I wasn't expecting her to do that, and her dad kind of being like, it's like, oh, how did you find me? It's like, no, the biggest question should be how I found you. It should be, why did I even have to find you? You up and left and everything. And he's like, you're right. The fact of the matter is he feels like this is the best option and everything. But it's like, no matter what, I'm always going to be there for you. It's like, it's not, I don't know, man. It's just kind of sucky because it's just kind of, and you can understand why Vic's kind of upset like she is, because it's like, that's super not cool, She ends up going back to, her mom's place and kind of tells her, like, yeah, you're kind of right about everything. Side note, another thing, a correction, because I thought, like I brought it up last episode, I thought I recognized the actress who plays Vic's mom. I totally got it wrong. I was confusing her with a different actress. This particular actress, her name is Virginia Cole. I was wondering what I recognize her from. Looking it up, if you've seen Sneaky Pete, she played Katie. I don't know if that's what I recognize her from or whether it was something else. I was looking through some of her other filmography. I might know her from other stuff. Apparently, she was in like Twin Peaks: The Return, like the 3rd season of Twin Peaks. Regardless, there was some other stuff, but I think Sneaky Pete, I recently binged on it, but I don't remember if that was before I saw the premiere last week or was it afterwards I binged it. Either way, that's kind of where I know her from now at the very least. Either way, I'm going on a huge tangent, but I do apologize. It is kind of interesting because obviously Vic has a new, like she has had issues with her mom, but now I think a lot of those issues disappeared because she kind of sees things of like, oh, mom, you're not the bad guy. Dad is. He literally cheated on you. Not only did he cheat on you, he literally left you and me to just be off with his new girlfriend, just left. Without saying anything to me, because, for Vic, it's like, okay, I get you. I thought you were just leaving mom, but it's like, no, you left me too. He's like, no, your mom must have misunderstood the situation. And like, no, you're just trying to, not get caught up in this, like, it's a whole thing. And obviously it's the whole conversation about like, because obviously Vic wants to go to college, but obviously for her mom, it's like, oh, that's just you dreaming like that because that's your dad. But she's like, no, I get it. You're the good guy. You're not the bad guy in this situation. But even for her, even with this complicated situation, she still kind of feels bad because for her, it's like her dad, he's dating a bartender, so he'll have easy access to alcohol, but she doesn't want her dad to kind of, drown himself in alcohol because it's like, so that's why for her, she decides, oh, I'm going to stay with dad. It's like, because he's better with me around him. Yes, there's this complicated thing of why he won't be here anymore because you guys aren't good for each other, but I'm good for him because I'll make sure to kind of keep him in check and everything like that, which that's hard on many different levels of like your mom having to be okay with that. Like, because the thing is, she even said it, she's like, your dad's problems are his problems. You shouldn't have to be the one to take responsibility for his issues. But she shows up anyway, which that's a super awkward situation. Not only are you moving in, with your dad and his new girlfriend, not just his new girlfriend, the woman he's been cheating on your mom with, that's an awkward situation. And it's, obviously they try to balance it with a little levity of like kind of the little laughing jokes they have between each other, but it's still a super awkward situation. Even awkward at the end of the episode when she comes back home and she's literally in the room they set up for her and she has to hear her dad having sex with his mistress. It's like, dude, that's another level. I also didn't expect her mom to show up like that either. Like, obviously that causing issues. There's everything with Maggie. She brings up the whole conversation about the Wraith. There's that, and I like Maggie's way of handling it. It's like, okay, obviously it's a super rare car. Well, I mean, enough people have it, but not enough people are going to be around driving it. So obviously at one point in time, the car must have broken down, so someone must have asked for parts. All we have to do is track down those parts and everything, and then we find the Wraith and potentially find the person who kidnapped Danny. Well, that actually works out because they find a lady who ran a place. Basically, she helped. The parts got replaced 32 years ago, but her son and grandson were kidnapped during this whole thing. So it is interesting learning about that car. It seems like it doesn't even need Charlie to be around to operate on his own, but now it kind of makes sense. But we'll get to that soon enough. it seems like everything kind of gets explained a little bit more, but regardless, it's kind of interesting that like it seems like it has a mind of its own and everything. But I was kind of wondering, it's like, oh, so it's not just Charlie who gives it its thing; it kind of exists on its own, which, like I said, I'll get to in a second. So that was kind of interesting. Obviously, the sheriff's still kind of finding this hard to believe, but it kind of lines up the whole aspect of like, well, we do know the Wraith might be involved with the whole kidnappings and all of that, so it's a lead, but obviously he's not going to jump on it. You have. I'd almost forgotten to talk about it too. Like the fact is, Vic and her friend Craig, she showed him the bridge, which we now know the bridge is only for Vic. No one else can use it because Craig tries to but can't. But obviously it is purely her intentions necessarily. It seems like it. It seems like if she focuses enough, she goes to where she needs to go. The bridge will always take her to where she needs to go. She was trying to get his rabbit Leonard, which was lost years ago, but it's like she found it at the landfill. Because she used a bridge to find it. But it was kind of interesting because even Craig was like, don't do that anymore, because like, you know, it's like, what if you end up going somewhere and just, or what if, and then I forgot what it was. He was saying like, what if something dies or you get hurt? Because obviously we can tell like it's affecting her because her eye gets hurt. But it does seem like it's not a permanent thing, because eventually it does seem like it goes away, because we saw it later on in the episode. Her left eye looked fine. So it's like, it is kind of like, it does normal damage, but I guess given enough time, she can recover. Like if you've ever seen, what is it? I want to say it might be a manga. I know it's definitely an anime called Speedgrapher. It's been such a long time since I saw it, but the main protagonist, he had a special ability with his camera. Every time he took photos, it messed up his eye, but as the series progressed, it does more and more damage to his eyes. I don't know if Vic's situation is the same thing. Like I said, it doesn't seem like, it seems like the damage recovers, but I don't know if it's going to be a thing of like eventually it'll stop recovering and she'll just suffer permanent damage. That's the point I'm trying to get across. If you've never seen that anime or whatever, like that reference means nothing to you, but that's just where my mind immediately goes with the whole situation. But it is interesting. She finds her way to here, Iowa, and runs into Maggie. It's just how serendipitous, but I guess her Scrabble told her exactly where to be, or she, because she talks about it later on. She's a medium, but when she breaks everything down, it's so fascinating. Like for one, describing like Vic's situation, her bridge is called an Inscape, and her motorcycle, her bike, is the knife. Basically, it punches through almost like, the space between reality and thought. It's kind of like, that's interesting, because her Inscape is because she's a super creative, and basically they're people who can bring their dreams and bring them into reality, which is kind of interesting. Apparently, like, a lot of people have those. Everyone has an Inscape, but only super creatives are able to literally bring theirs into this world. I wonder why her specifically manifests it like that. Maybe it's because in some shape or form, like, the bridge has a connection to her mom and dad. So, I guess it makes sense with her bike. So maybe it just manifests itself, because obviously that bridge had significance before, so maybe that's it. But that's just kind of fascinating that obviously it manifests itself indifferently because even Maggie was like, oh, I'm not a super creative. My situation is a little different because she's a medium, so her gift works a little differently. But it seems like everyone comes with a cost. In, her case, it's like, in Maggie's case, interestingly enough, her thing kind of leaves her with a bit of a stutter, whereas Vic's situation is the headaches and her eye. It's just the natural cost from using her abilities. I also love when Maggie does her thing with her bag, and Vic's like, oh my god, ugh, and she's like, yes, yeah, I know, it's creepy, and I just think that was funny. But it also puts in perspective that Charles is one as well, a super creative. So I guess that kind of explains, like, I guess Christmas Land is his Inscape, and his Wraith, his car, is his knife. And it kind of makes perfect sense. And that's why I was thinking that was kind of interesting, because that's why I was wondering. I was like, oh, so that means it doesn't necessarily, I was like, his car can act on its own and stuff like that. So that's why I was kind of like, oh, okay, so that makes me wonder, could Vic's bike actually act on its own, like if given enough time? Or, or does technically, because I would assume like the car is his knife, but for it to have its own powers and stuff like that makes me feel like it's part of his Inscape. Like maybe it's a combination of the two, or maybe his car is the Inscape and Christmas Land just happens to be this other dimension that he's able to get to because his Inscape is the car. I don't know. I would assume it's the knife, and Christmas Land would be the Inscape, but you know, who knows. So I just thought that was kind of a fascinating situation. If it turns out to be his knife, it is interesting because that could mean that Vic's bike could have become like that potentially. I don't know. Having a mind of its own is kind of very interesting. Maybe that'll be kind of a plot point that they may come up later on. But that's why I feed into it even more, the whole aspect of like Charles is lying about, you know, because he's making it sound, oh, I'm saving these kids. In particular, he wants to save like 10 more kids or whatever. And it's like, you're lying because it's like, because even the whole aspect of, because even 32 years ago, he was an old man, but now he was still old, present day, but then he got younger again. So it does seem like, once again, this whole getting younger thing, doesn't seem like that was something that recently happened. I'm wondering, was it a situation of he didn't come into it? Well, because the way Maggie says, like, the whole situation, like, her coming into her thing, she was basically a little bit younger than Vic is now when the whole situation happened to her. So it's like, maybe the same thing happened to Charles, or maybe his came much later in life when he was already an old man, or maybe he had already spent so many years being a serial kidnapper that, you know, he was an old man doing it, and he stayed an old man because his Inscape and everything allowed him to just stay alive. It gave him immortality, but now it's rewarding him with youth. Maybe like a side effect of kidnapping all those kids is he's getting youth from it, but that was never something he realized until now. Maybe things have changed. Obviously everything, like, you know, because once again, it's like, we see the shorter way is Vic's thing. So I'm wondering those other things we saw on the map last episode, because I was wondering if it's like, oh, is a shorter way supposed to be like a ley line type of situation? It's like, no, it seems like obviously it's specifically tied to Vic. But then that makes me wonder those other things on the map, were they other super creatives as well? Just like, but it seems like hers is the most dangerous because she can literally cross the, you know, the bridge between reality, and with her bike she can punch through what is essentially the boundary between reality and thought. So meaning even without Charles, she can get to Christmas Land because she's the girl that can find things that are lost. That includes these lost children, so that makes her dangerous to everything that Charles represents. Which is interesting because Vic and Bing have a connection. They're tight. So the thought is that eventually that might be the thing where Bing is told like, oh, you have to do that, but then he finds out, oh, Vic's the one, but it's like, oh, she threatens everything, but it's like, she's my friend, so maybe that makes him have a little reluctancy towards this. I don't know. It's interesting though, because obviously like this whole situation, I guess because of her Inscape, it is tapping into everything Charles is up to, because obviously like his radio channeled into her. She had the headaches. She also had the headaches, and then she saw the little girl Haley, her chalk turn into a candy cane for a second. So I'm curious, is it like both of their Inscapes are kind of clashing in some shape or form? Is it because like there's some frequency overlapping in a literal sense in this case of like, are there Inscapes kind of overlapping in some shape or form, tapping into each other? Why is that? I guess because there's so much stuff going missing, and she is the one that finds missing stuff, that I guess out of anyone it would affect her the most, I guess. I don't know. It's something interesting to think about. I think obviously, you know, Maggie asked for Vic's help, but Vic is like, I don't want to be special. I didn't ask for this. Like, I can't, you know, it's like, who am I to go chasing after someone who's been kidnapping kids? She's not, you know, I'm not a hero. Like, I'm a teenager. What am I supposed to do about this? I didn't ask for this situation. I believe they're kind of setting it up to be like, you know, she won't get active and be a part of this until like Haley gets kidnapped. We already saw the candy cane kind of appear in her hand, so that might kind of be like she's potentially set up to be another target, maybe on some shape or form. Vic's mind was like, her Inscape was kind of warning her that potentially Haley would be a future target. To be fair, that's kind of in the town they're from and everything, so we could easily see Bing going after her anyway, especially because they're in that relative area together and everything. So that's where my mind is on it though. So Like I said, a lot of fascinating things got brought up during this episode. But I'm very interested to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.